Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Chris and I are back. We're so excited to work alongside one another and answer your questions, but most of all, excited to be joined by you guys. So as always, please go to the comments pane that you see on your right-hand side of your screen and let us know who you are and where you're calling from. I say that every time, Chris.
I know. I'm always thinking, like I told you last time, like a telethon.
It's a telethon. Like, hi, welcome to Dr. Liz and Chris. Where are you calling in from today?
Hi, I'm Susan from Alabama. That was my worst Southern accent, so let's never try that again, please.
But right, like I don't know why I do it. Sorry, but where are you joining from, right? So we usually have users from all across the globe, and it's so awesome for us to get to see the impact that these live streams are making. So please make sure you say hi and introduce yourself so that we can be sure to say hi back. And of course, as always, please post questions as you have them. So throughout today's stream, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have something you feel like it would be helpful for Chris and I to share our insight on, please let us know so that we can do so. For those of you who weren't able to join last week, I was back as my first Live with Liz back from maternity leave. So super excited to be seeing you guys and to be back, and most excited to share that I am now being joined by Chris. So Chris and I are sharing these live streams. We're going to be doing them together. Sometimes it'll be both of us, sometimes it'll be one of us. But really, we have made the full transition that all noon o'clock is what I was about to say to you guys. But noon Eastern, 11 my time, 9 a.m. Chris's time, right? Every Wednesday, we'll be joining you right here through the IOCDF's platform. This is the virtual programming. You guys can visit iocdf.org/peace of mind. That is where we really host and house all of the information for our programming. So this is where you'll find details on the upcoming live streams, who's leading them, what topics we're covering. And also, this is where you should be submitting questions that you have. So if there's content questions that you want us to address, you want us to answer, this is where you should go to input that. So make sure you write that down. So iocdf.org/peace of mind, and continue to visit for the upcoming programming. A couple housekeeping. This is not an emergency or crisis hotline. If you're feeling unsafe or suicidal, we want you to take the steps to keep yourself safe. And this is not the platform to connect with in order to do so. Instead, we want you to call 911, go to your local emergency room, or call the suicide prevention line at 1-800-273-8255. Safety is your priority. It's our priority. But unfortunately, it's important to know that IOCDF does not serve as a crisis hotline. And so if you are in distress, please look at and take note of the resources that can help you in those times. Of course, a couple other updates. Chris and I are here to provide our insight. Both Chris and myself share our personal struggle with OCD. We talk openly about that. And of course, we also are both clinicians in the field. And so we talk a lot about some of the professional feedback we would give around certain topics. While it's our place to share personal and professional feedback, it is not our place in this forum to be your personal therapist. So it's really important to know that if you are looking for specific feedback, we want you to be seeking your own individual therapy. These live streams are not intended to replace that. So you'll see us kind of answer questions broadly and generally, and not as much in a specific format. Please make sure that you tell us hi and that you let us know where you're joining from. And of course, submit any questions on the pane that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. The upcoming 1 million steps for OCD walk is just around the corner. There's going to be walks all across the country. This will be in September. So please make sure you go to iocdf.org/walk to learn more about the walks near you and how you can join. Registration is also open for our online OCD conference that's going to be taking place this year from October the 8th through the 10th. Both Chris and myself and many other advocates, many other clinicians will be speaking and joining in this amazing 3-day event, and we hope to see you there. And of course, please make sure you follow and join for many of our other live streams. Today at 7 p.m., we're going to be covering anxiety in athletes, where Tom Smalley and others are going to be discussing mental health with coaches and teammates. And as many of you know, we try our best to do lots of different live streams and lots of different events. And we are really excited to talk a little bit about some of our ideas and what we're planning to do in the upcoming months. So Chris and I will let Chris talk this through as well. But Chris and I really sat down together and said, what do we think the audience might really be looking for and might want. And this is after I had done a lot of live streams, and then Chris had obviously done some awesome live streams, and a lot of them while I was out. And we really talked about changing it to be a format where we're going to really focus on themes. So every month we're going to kind of be addressing a different theme. In August, it made sense for us that the theme would be around schools. It'd be around children and adolescents returning to schools, those that are college age returning to schools, parents, what it's like when your kids are returning to school. So a lot of our content over the next month is going to be focused on schools. So it'll be anxiety in the classroom. It'll be talking about when you notice symptoms, when do you seek treatment? And we will try our best to make sure that Chris and I speak to these topics, that the town halls are going to be focused on these topics. And of course, just Ethan will continue to serve as an advocacy platform, but he will also bring in the relevant topics and nature around those topics that he can for discussion points. In September, we're going to be doing comorbidities. So Chris and I will be sharing education and content from comorbidities that range from hair pulling, skin picking, BDD, BFRBs, social anxiety, anxiety and depression. In October, we're super excited. We're going to be focusing on values in OCD. So October is also where OCD Awareness Week is. It's the second week of October. So we will have multiple live streams and events in October that are going to focus on how we choose values when we live with OCD and what that's like and how we can really live this values-based life despite our diagnosis. And we're also going to focus a lot on the importance that will play out in treatment, in recovery, and moving forward. In November, we're going to talk about stigma, how we navigate the stigma and what that is like to really be able to navigate both stigma with OCD, but also how do we disclose our diagnosis with loved ones? What does that look like? When do we share it at the workplace, right? All these kind of things that come into play. And then our final theme for this year is going to be holidays. And that will be in December, where we're really going to talk about the holiday blues and what it's like when we feel like we're supposed to feel happy, we're supposed to be excited to be around family, but maybe it's really triggering for us. And so we're excited to be able to share in all those different themes. And we're hopeful that these content areas will be really useful. And so Chris and I's biggest pitch to both of you is, not to both of you, to all of you, sorry, is to please let us know. What are themes? What are topics that you think would be useful in the new year? We're definitely planning to do a subtypes month or two, because we may name more than 1 month on that, where we really go through all the different subtypes of OCD, what it looks like in practice, in the sense that, like, what does it look like when those of us are suffering with it, but then also in clinical practice, how do you treat it? What does it look like? Love that, Felice. Spouses need more support. Absolutely think we should do a month on family. And Chris and I already had talked about this, so thank you for reminding me, Jess. Let's definitely please note that in the new year, we'll make sure we have one focus on family, and that will include how to support a spouse, a partner, family members, what it looks like. Love all the different comments coming in, so please keep posting them. But today, thank you. Thank y'all for joining us. Thank you, Kate. Chris and I are excited to be here, and I'm excited to have Chris because I think that is what makes this an amazing team, is his presence. So Chris, welcome, and say hi to everybody. Sorry, I've rambled.
No, it's all good. I'm super excited about the themes. You know, I run 2 support groups, actually 3. And, you know, we do that sometimes, like we'll have themes and stuff like that. And it's funny because people will go in thinking like, oh, this theme isn't going to be relevant for me. And they always leave the group like, I'm glad you talked about that. I didn't realize I had that subtype. Or, you know what, I'm not a family member. I have OCD, but the tips I heard now, I can tell my family. So I think, you know, for everybody watching, even if you see that the theme that week, we also talk about OCD in general, but even if you don't think the theme specifically is something that you may deal with, I promise if you come, you will take away something that is relevant for you. But super excited about the programming. Thank you to everyone that says hi so far. Neil said I looked handsome, so far it's my favorite comment. But other than that, no, it's just good to be here. I'm always excited. We have so many good questions to get to today.
We do. So what do you want to do, Chris? Where do you want to start? Just so everybody knows, we have questions from the last live stream we need to get caught up on. And we also have questions from the OCD SoCal conference, which, by the way, was incredible. So kudos to Chris and his team, because it was such an amazing event. So you tell me, Chris, I'm happy for us to do either.
Yeah, what I was thinking is, why don't we go back and forth? Like, you asked one from the last, and then I'll take one from the OCD SoCal. We can get to as many as we can. We promise we'll try to get through all of them. Maybe.
Awesome. And of course, there is a lot, but we'll do our best to answer. If you see that we didn't answer your question, please post it in the comments box. But please know, sometimes one answer actually answers a couple questions. So sometimes if we don't answer a question specifically and we're going on to the next, it's because we feel like it's already been addressed. So just kind of keep that in mind. So the first question, Chris, is what is pure OCD? And this is actually great question, very relevant. And I think it's really important for us to talk about. So if you want to share a little bit of insight to the viewers when they hear the word or the theme, pure OCD, what should they be thinking of, and how do they better understand this category of OCD?
Yeah, so pure OCD, I believe it could have been Stephen Phillipson, I think, or somebody coined the term.
You're
And
right.
what happened for there's a lot of people out there that don't show as many or any very external compulsions. So around, I think he coined it in the 90s, like around that time when we heard about OCD, it was a lot of hand washing, a lot of checking, a lot of tapping. So people thought of themselves as not having OCD because they didn't have any of those kind of things. Sorry, there we go. They didn't have any of those symptoms, so they didn't feel like they fit into the community. So pure O was to kind of describe this idea of I have OCD, but nothing I deal with is external. What I like to talk to clients about is because sometimes it's been great. Like I think the term has helped people say, wait, I do have OCD. I just don't show outward compulsions. But the thing I get worried about sometimes is some people hear that term. And then when they read all the literature about how to get better from OCD, they keep seeing compulsions, 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 compulsions. So I've had people come to me kind of last ditch effort. Their families brought them in and said, I don't think I can ever get better. My OCD doesn't have compulsions, and everything I read says I have to stop compulsions in order to get better. So what I tell people is, even though the term says pure O, what it really means is that you still have a C in there. You still have compulsions. Those compulsions just may be more mental. They may be mental reviewing, mental checking. It may be trying to push out a negative thought, counting in your head, compulsive rumination. So I don't know how you feel. The term, I think it served a purpose. It let people know that, hey, there's other people with OCD that just don't show external stuff. But I also think we need to coin a different term that people really know, like, hey, I do actually have compulsions. They just happen to be mental. Because if you're mental ruminating for 8 hours a day, those are just as dangerous as somebody washing their hands 8 hours a day. So we have to make sure people know they do have compulsions. They just happen to be mental, and you can still use ERP for mental compulsions.
Love it. Yeah, those are the main takeaways. And I think what's really important to know is that many people in the Pure O kind of community have really identified with this term, and they find it to be something that they can relate very well to. And so that's great, right? We're not saying there's anything wrong with it being a term if that's how you identify. But what's important is that we continue the appropriate education with that term, right? So pure O doesn't actually mean purely obsessional. It often just means that the rituals tend to be internal versus external. But like Chrissy Hodges speaks a lot about pure O. And I remember at the conference a couple of years ago when she was receiving an award from IOCDF, she was saying how, there is still rituals, but they're mental rituals, and how ERP is still an amazing treatment modality. And those are the messages we want to make sure that we send, because we want everyone to know that pure O is a category and a type of OCD that is no different really than any of the other categories, and the treatment looks the exact same. And so that's really important for us. I always say, not only in Pure O do we have to make sure we identify the rituals, but it's the same with any other category to make sure we identify the role that avoidance plays, right? Avoidance is something we don't see, but avoidance 100% contributes to OCD and increases OCD symptoms the same way a ritual does.
Yeah, very well said. So the first question I have from OC SoCal, I'm in treatment, how many hours a day should I be doing exposures in between sessions with my therapist? So I'm guessing this person might be going outpatient or weekly. Or it could be an intensive and then in the evening. So Liz, like when you're working with clients, about how many hours? Is that something that's blanket for you? Is it different for everybody? Maybe speak to that.
100% different for everybody. Treatment should 100% be individualized. Treatment is not something that's just this black and white guidance of like this rule book that you follow one way or the other. And I think that in the short, you're probably not going to love my answer, which is that we actually should be doing ERP all day long, right? In different ways. And I don't believe that it needs to be like a set number, but instead it's about creating and making ERP part of your lifestyle, right? You create and do exposures all day long. Those of us who suffer with OCD know that almost in everything we do, there's opportunity for exposure. And the more we can welcome that and lean in and embrace it, the less hold or power our OCD is going to have. However, I think it's really important that we do get a break from treatment as well. And so in our intensive program here, our residential support program here at McLean Houston, right, we have our treatment days 8:45 to 4 p.m. I don't recommend that after 4 p.m. my patients are doing active ERP blocks. Like, I don't really want them doing another 2 hours straight of exposures, because they need to have time to relax. They need to have time to do BA. They've done a lot throughout the day. However, I also don't want them to go do rituals, right? And so for a lot of our patients, and my patients here right now, right, continuing to push through in the evenings, continuing to engage in everyday functioning or living, right? That is ERP for them. And so it's hard to say. If you're in an outpatient treatment, I think that's something you really should be working with your provider, right? Are you seeing them multiple times a week? What are they wanting you to do? And you should, with your provider, be creating homework goals. And those homework goals should pretty much dictate the way that you understand or the quantity of ERP that you're doing throughout the day and the way you understand it, right? So if you are supposed to be doing 5 exposures a day, maybe those exposures only take 30 seconds each, and that's actually not a lot of like active ERP time, but you're also committing that as unexpected triggers come up, you're not going to ritualize. So it really just depends on where you're at. I think the more severe and the more you're struggling, the bigger the dose of ERP you're going to need right now. And the more you go into management, it becomes less about a clear dose and more about engaging in it as part of your lifestyle.
Yeah, no, you hit every point. The only point I was going to make, because you hit all of the good ones, is the one you just made, is that as you get through treatment, it's going to transition into more just everyday life. I know for us, we do an intensive outpatient program, and people are here every day in the mornings from 10 to 1 Pacific Standard Time, 10 to 1. And then what we say is kind of what you say, Liz, is like, you just did 3 hours of exposures one-on-one with a therapist. Like, go chill, go eat, go get your life back. But then in the evening, maybe do 2 about 1.5 hour blocks. So you're doing about 6 hours a day of exposures during an intensive program. But as people leave it, it's more so about everyday life. So if you have hit and run OCD, drive those those surface streets to get to work and other places that you know are high traffic. If you have OCD around getting your hands sticky, chew gum and make sure you're throwing your gum away once an hour, taking it out. I mean, you can incorporate them into everyday things, less than having to do blocks that people start off treatment doing.
100%. Next question is one of the most important questions that we get all the time. And this is a question that we really, most of my patients don't like hearing the answer I give them. And so it's really important that we break this down and help us understand the goals of treatment. So the question is, how do I get rid of intrusive thoughts and anxiety?
You know what? The biggest thing I tell people day one of treatment, because I feel like if you don't have this conversation right when somebody comes in, they don't understand treatment. I tell them that while we're in treatment, our goal is to never try to get rid of intrusive thoughts, because that's the O in OCD and we have no power over that. What I'm working with my clients and doing is we're going to change our relationship with those thoughts. I will say, like, as you get into management and potentially medication over time, you may get to a point where you're having less frequent intrusive thoughts. You're having less loud. They're less frequent. But the great news is that people like your parents, your friends, your neighbors, etc., they have intrusive thoughts too. It's just a human condition. So the difference is they don't identify with those thoughts. They don't do compulsions to try to get them away. The other thing is, when I start a program with someone, I say, what are your treatment goals? And a lot of times they'll say, oh, my treatment goal is to not be anxious. And I tell them, well, the only people that aren't anxious are dead people, because everybody's anxious. So what we're learning to do is we're no longer treating intrusive thoughts and anxiety as the worst thing that's ever happened to us. We're learning how to live with that anxiety, live with those intrusive thoughts. And what happens over time is people start to recognize that it's not their job anymore to push them away. In fact, pushing away or trying to get rid of the intrusive thoughts through compulsive behaviors actually makes you more attuned to them and brings them back. Your job is to live your best life every single day with the presence of those thoughts. And when you get to a point that you don't have a loud reaction, you're not debating with those thoughts, pushing them away, freaking out, ignoring them, all those stuff, you'll start to notice those thoughts become background noise and they don't impact you as much. I think once I have that conversation with people, it actually makes people happier, because as they're doing the treatment, they do feel like they're in control now. Oh, I can choose how to react. But before they came to treatment, they felt out of control because they're trying to get rid of intrusive thoughts and it just made it worse.
Bingo, right? So the answer is actually we don't want you to have the goal of getting rid of intrusive thoughts or the goal of getting rid of anxiety, because guess what? Like, that's not feasible, right? As Chris said, we have no control over obsessions. They're going to come and they're going to continue to come. People without OCD have them as well, but it's how do we respond to them, right? Because that is what we can control and that is what we can change. And the way we respond will also dictate the power those thoughts have in our life, right? Do they become something that causes distress and that is frequent and that's interfering, or are they just, is it just noise? Is it just there, right? That we can kind of, thanks brain, and move on. I will tell you, as a new mom, I've been experiencing more intrusive thoughts lately in the past week or so, more even sexual intrusive thoughts for me around my daughter. And it's been hard in the sense that I have these, and my urge, right, my immediate response of go-to is to ritualize around them, right, to seek reassurance, to make sure that they're not anything, right? But I know what that response will do to those thoughts, and also my current relationship and ability to spend time and be present with Olivia, compared to being able to push them of like, okay, like, had this intrusive thought, going to keep doing the same thing and not going to change what I'm doing with her and the time I'm spending with her. As far as anxiety goes, we should, with time, treatment should reduce your overall anxiety. Again, the goal is not to get rid of it, because what that means is that we're telling ourselves anxiety is dangerous, anxiety is scary, we shouldn't have it. And that's actually not the goal. The goal is that we understand anxiety as a natural kind of physiological response to certain situations, but it is important that we know that the way we respond, right, our behavior influences our anxiety. So we do get to influence our anxiety and the impact it has on our life, but we can't necessarily get rid of it or cure it.
Absolutely. So this next question was actually probably one of the loud ones that we got at the conference. A lot of people asked that. They said, how does diet, exercise, and just healthy living play a role in the treatment of OCD? So some of the questions were literally like, does diet and exercise cure OCD?
Sure.
Other people were like, okay, does diet and exercise and healthy, sleep, meditation, and all that stuff help? So some people cure, some people help. So
yeah. So I'm going to answer it the way it is, because this is the answer I can give. I think that it does play a role in treatment. I very clearly will tell you it does not cure OCD, and it is not the treatment for OCD, right? So it's very important to know that diet, exercise, healthy living are important components to your treatment and are probably really important that you integrate in, but they are not the treatment. Right. So the appropriate treatment for OCD is exposure and response prevention, oftentimes a combination of ERP and medication being the gold standard. Exercise, diet, and healthy living is going to help make ERP feasible and going to probably increase our outcomes, right? So when we think about healthy living, if I'm only sleeping 4 hours a night, my capacity to do ERP is going to be pretty limited, right? I'm exhausted. I don't have the ability to engage the way that I need to for many different reasons, compared to if I'm engaging in good sleep hygiene, I'm getting a good night's rest. I think the same goes for healthy living and exercise, right? If I'm eating well and exercising, I might have more energy. My general mental health can be a little bit more stabilized, which might give me the capacity to engage more frequently in ERP. But healthy eating, exercise, and diet, that in and of itself is not treatment for OCD. And I do have to be pretty clear about that, because I get this question all the time. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. And there's even clinicians and doctors who will try to lead you down paths of certain diets, certain exercise regimens, certain things that you need to do, talking about your gut health and different things as a treatment for OCD. And we just don't have the research to back that up. So be careful.
Yeah, I always tell people it's a component, in the sense that, yes, everything you said, you are not going to fight OCD if you haven't eaten all day, you have no sleep in you, and you're not active. However, somebody can be super active, eat well, get great sleep, and their OCD isn't going to get better if they're not doing ERP. So it may be a little, it may be a part of it, but please know that ERP is the heart, the soul, the center of treatment.
Next question is, how is OCD treated with a personality disorder?
Yeah, so I love that we're doing comorbidities month. You know what? A lot of times when somebody comes in with a comorbidity, so let's say with a personality disorder, for instance, I'm trying to weave out, does that personality disorder in any way impact the treatment? So for instance, I'm going to use borderline personality disorder because I would say that's probably the number one personality disorder I see people coming in with OCD. It's obviously not the only. I would say the other high one is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. But as for personality disorder, that's a lot different than OCD. So what I like to see at first is the borderline personality disorder, is that being treated? Are there symptoms in session that's from the personality disorder that's making it difficult for them to even engage in therapy, family dynamics at home, etc.? So if the borderline personality disorder is managed and somebody has gotten DBT treatment for it and they're in a good place and it's not impacting OCD at all, I often don't feel like it comes up that much. I like to have a collaborative, relationship with their DBT specialist and make sure that we're not stepping on any toes. However, if somebody's personality disorder, if they come in and it's absolutely impacting too much in treatment. So often we see with borderline personality disorder a difficulty with regulating emotions. And so if they're not getting DBT treatment and we do ERP, I find that often they don't manage that raised anxiety very well. I've worked with a client, more than one, but a client comes to mind who wasn't getting DBT treatment. We did one small exposure that was a 1 on their hierarchy, and they completely melted down for 3 hours. We had to call a CAT team. So it's one of those things that if it's impacting it, just like if somebody has intense trauma, just like if somebody has other personality disorders, they may need to see someone who's a specialist in that. I would be a little bit weary unless somebody has the training to try to see your OCD therapist for everything. If you're going through a personality disorder, et cetera, making sure that you're working with someone with expertise.
I agree, and there are definitely many people who specialize in both personality disorders and OCD, but it's pretty rare that I think they're treating both. And they're typically either like treating your OCD or somebody's doing a clear DBT intervention for your personality disorder. But Chris is right. We really want to make sure that emotion regulation skills are in place. And if you are actively struggling with a personality disorder and your ability to to engage in emotion regulation, right? Regulate your emotions isn't there. We are not going to recommend ERP at that time because the reality is ERP dysregulates you.
Absolutely. The next question is a little long, but I'll read the heart and soul of it. Basically, somebody's going back to college this fall. They feel depressed seeing everybody doing so well on social media. They've talked to friends that they had to take a gap year. And so they're talking to friends who's already a year ahead. They felt that they were stuck at home a lot doing therapy. How do they not focus on feeling left behind when they return to college? So
I think that's a great question. And first thing I'll say is what we see on social media isn't usually real, right? So be careful comparing yourself to the images that people are putting on social media. Chris and I are actually going to have an entire live stream coming up where Chris is going to cover kind of images and what is it? Is it body image, Chris?
Yeah,
that's going to be the main thing. Yeah, but we will hopefully definitely be talking about kind of these comparisons in social media and what happens. And so I want to encourage everyone to be really careful with that. The second piece is to think about what you're doing for yourself, right? Instead of us thinking about what we're missing and thinking about the fact that man, this stinks, we're not there. Instead, think about what you're doing, right? You are taking time to address your mental health so that you're set up for the rest of your life. That is something that I bet all those other college kids who aren't taking time off aren't doing. And there may come a time later in life where they have to address their mental health, and that's okay. But the reality is it's much more important for us to think about what we're doing for ourselves versus what we're missing. Right. So you are taking the most important step for you to be the most healthy you. And the reality is that if you don't do that and you just push through and go to college, there's a chance that you're going to have to stop anyways to address this. And so I always want to push us of understanding and really looking at what we're doing versus what we're missing. Right. The situation, the opportunities we're creating for ourselves in the future are far greater than the opportunities that we're missing right now in this short interim. So it's really important that you change the conversation that you're having, you engage in self-compassion. It's also equally important to join support groups and meet other folks who are doing the same thing so that you can have support in feeling like you're not the only one. That is really critical as well.
I'll just add from a personal note, my first degree took me 7 years to get because that was at the heart and soul of the OCD. And if I would have given up, because there was times I just felt I was too old, it was going to take too long, I was going to be behind. And if I would have listened to that, I wouldn't be sitting here, at least not as a clinician. So for me, I went on to get 3 degrees. It was a lot of hard work. And just like Liz said, I used that tenacity that I had to pull deep from to overcome the OCD as a strength. And sure, I'm not going to lie to you, there was times that I was at school with people a lot younger than me, and there was times that it really hit me hard. But just like Liz said, when I reminded myself what I was doing for myself and of how much I went through, I started to be proud of myself and appreciate the choices I made versus judging them. That really
100%.
helped. So the next question is, I'm worried about sending my 6-year-old to school because of her OCD rituals. How do I know if it's okay to send her to school? Are there any accommodations? And what should I tell the school?
It's a great question, and I think that this is something I really want you to be working with her personal therapist. As a mom, it's important that you can be a mom and support the decisions that the treatment team makes versus trying to be the treatment team. So that's number one. Number two, I want to say that those of us, I think Chris would agree with me, and I'm speaking for him, but I know I can speak for myself, is that avoiding and, kind of avoiding the situation because of the anxiety doesn't make it better. Right? We have to learn how to live with our diagnosis, which means manage it and engage in everyday activities. And I worry that if we hold somebody back from school and from situations because we're afraid of the anxiety it will cause, the ripple effect that we'll have moving forward, right? Will it create just more or additional anticipatory anxiety? Will it make us feel like we, are potentially going to be in a place where you're going to be fighting even more to get her to be willing to try school in the future because now she's used to not going. I'm saying she, right? Okay, yes. So I think be cautious of it. As far as accommodations, I think if accommodations are healthy, if they're helpful, they're not healthy if they're helping OCD. Right? They should be helping us, but not helping OCD. And so sometimes we do engage in or ask the school to engage in accommodations at the beginning with the goal that with treatment, we're going to remove these. But to plan to just have accommodations forever or, create an environment where we can just avoid anxiety, that isn't realistic long-term. And that's not going to set her up to succeed and to be able to get the skills that she needs to fight her OCD or anxiety in the moments.
Perfect. The only thing I have to add is you're going to maybe find it a lot easier if your clinician, like Liz said, is the one reaching out. Because I've had some schools around here not give accommodations for OCD because they don't feel anybody needs one. So it helps being the professional reaching out, talking to school, educating. So that may be, if you're having a hard time, that may be better than trying to do it yourself.
100%. So the next one is, how can I afford treatment? And Chris, I will be happy to share my insight in this as well, but I'd love to hear you start. We know treatment is expensive. We know it tends to be one of the reasons a lot of people don't access appropriate care. So what are your thoughts and what support can you offer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that for instance, like our center, we are in network with Kaiser. We're in network with another, insurance. So we're doing everything we can. I think people don't understand on the back end how hard it is. It took us like 4 years to get in with both insurance panels, and we're trying, and it takes a lot of work. So, we're trying, obviously, we work on a sliding scale. So I think that's a big thing, is reaching out. Some centers are working with interns that are being supervised by a clinician, and they can see you at maybe a lower cost. I do know NoCD is doing stuff through insurance, and they can be as helpful as possible as well. One of the things I do out here in California is there is a treatment center through Keck Medical School at USC that takes Medicare and Medi-Cal. So obviously, often I'll refer that. But it's hard. I mean, my own treatment was before there was any kind of insurance for OCD, and we had to pay out of pocket, and our family doesn't have money, and we struggled a lot. So it is a difficult thing. It's hard, and I wish there was like a perfect answer. I will say that that's why you come to things like this. There's support groups that are low cost. We run really low cost, and we run a free support group. There's definitely great self-help books. There's videos. There's conferences. There's educational material. We gave away 200 scholarship tickets for OCD SoCal. So looking at your local affiliates, seeing what they're having to offer low cost can help as well. And the last thing I'll say is, sometimes if you can find a therapist that is in your insurance panel, doesn't specialize in OCD, but that's the best you can do, buy a second. I like Claiborne's OCD workbook. Like, buy a second book, hand it to that therapist, say, look, I'm not here to get reassurance. I've been reading this book. Can we go through it together? Sometimes that can help. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
100%. So here's my first and most important feedback, and Chris actually is a perfect example of what he just described. Chris is a part of the OCD SoCal affiliate with IOCDF. And so my first recommendation is always to get in touch with your local affiliate, because they often can point you to resources in your community and locally that the national organization or that someone like myself in Texas isn't going to be aware of. If you live in Houston, I can give you a list of providers. I can tell you who does sliding scale, who will do no-cost treatment through our public sector, right? Because I know this area. I'm very well connected in my community. And so 100% connect with your affiliates to see what options exist, because not only will they know of options we might not know of, but they also will hopefully know of options who are trained and educated specifically to OCD and OCD treatment. The second piece is that there is a wonderful article by Fred Pinzel, I believe it is, on IOCDF's website about how to advocate for insurance reimbursement and coverage. So definitely take a look at that, because sometimes when you hear, oh, it's a private pay clinic, that doesn't mean you can't file independently and that you can't try to get reimbursed. Often if you have out-of-network benefits, there's a lot of options to be able to get coverage. I actually called my insurance provider, Cigna, the other day just to see what it would be like for me to navigate the process to be able to share with patients. And I learned that like they will cover 50 to 80% of all of my out-of-network mental health work. And so that's something that, like, for me, you just file the super bill after, right? So learn and advocate for what are your options. Just because the clinic says, oh, we don't take insurance, does not mean you don't have the option to use insurance for your treatment. The second piece, as Chris mentioned, is there's amazing websites, apps now that didn't exist previously. So NoCD is an amazing resource that has clinicians across the globe. OCD Challenge, which is now run by IOCDF, is a free self-help tool and website. So there's lots of ways that you can get connected and understand what your options are. And think about what we call a single case agreement. That is when you have out-of-network benefits and you're able to get a single case agreement in place for treatment. So there's lots of options. Sometimes it just on the surface feels like there's not an option for us, but the more we dig, we're able to find some resources.
Perfect. So Liz, I'm going to ask two questions in a row because I think you're the perfect one to answer both. So I want to get to the first one because you just went through this experience. Somebody asked, I feel like I might hurt. I'm a new mother. I feel like I might hurt my baby. I've never had intrusive thoughts like this. I know I'd never do it, but it makes me anxious. It makes me sad just thinking about it. Sometimes it even feels real. What do I do?
100% see an OCD specialist and really get going with your provider. So especially if you've taken a gap in treatment, right? So it's important to know that one of the components of OCD intrusive thoughts and OCD in general is that it latches on to the things that are most important to us and that play the biggest role in our lives at the time. So of course it makes sense that it would be latching on to your experience as being a new mom, right? To your baby, you love them so much, but you're having these scary thoughts, whatever they might be. Again, remembering these are unwanted intrusive thoughts. So kind of that saying that you just said of, I know I wouldn't do it, but they scare me, right? That's when we're like, yeah, OCD. Some people do have other intrusive thoughts that need to be addressed, but they would be addressed differently. But we know when it's OCD, we want to still do ERP. Very common for us to see what we call postpartum OCD. So after the birth of our child, starting to see these intrusive thoughts come. And I can tell you, I'm dealing with that myself right now, but I am at a place where I'm working really hard to not engage in any rituals because I know it'll be like a floodgate. If I do a couple, I'll find myself stuck in a loop.
The second one I'm going to ask because Tom, myself, and Ethan can't answer this because nobody loves me and wants to get married to me. But the question is, I'm going to get married this year, and I'm constantly questioning if my wife is the right person for me. I learned at the conference this is a type of OCD. What do I do about it? So you've been married. You have OCD. Is this something you went through, or can you relate to this? Or at least what should this person do if they're questioning if this should even be the person that they should marry?
Right. Again, this is all about the core of OCD of learning to live with uncertainty, right? In our relationships, in our life, we have lots of different questions. And the reality is that certainty isn't possible. We can't be 100% certain that this is the right person. We can't be 100% certain that we're not going to get a disease by touching a doorknob, right? But it's about leaning into the uncertainty and taking risks. It's about that greater good and those values, right? If this is someone you love and you want to spend your life with them, and maybe you're questioning that too, and OCD's, coming into play, but sometimes you'll say like, oh, I feel like I know this, but, right? OCD is the doubting disease. So things we kind of like, we feel certain about, but then we feel really uncertain. OCD latches onto that part that we feel uncertain. And so if you've identified this as being relationship OCD, this will be a topic that we do cover in the future. Also make sure you're doing ERP for it, right? So it's all about leaning in that like, maybe they're the right person, maybe not, but I'm still going to live by my values and do this, right? If we have these intrusive thoughts about someone we love, yet we were excited to go to the movies with them, it's not about saying, oh no, I need to solve this. Sorry, I can't go with you. It's about leaning into that uncertainty and still doing that values-based activity with that individual.
Absolutely. And one day when I get married, I can answer that from a personal experience.
You can still answer it as a clinician and from personal experience.
Yeah, what I'll add then as a clinician, one thing real quick is I like John Grayson said once, he goes, your goal if you have ROCD is to find your second best potential wife. The best one out there that OCD talks about who's perfect and has no flaws and you would know instantly you're going to fall in love and move to Paris and be happy forever, let that go. Find the second best person and be happy with them.
Love it. All right. So this is a really good one. And I think COVID has created a lot of mental health disruption, but also has created some benefits. And you'll know what those are when I read this question, Chris. But how do I find ERP for my young son when there's no specialist in our area?
Yeah, so one of the greatest things that came out of COVID, because there hasn't been many, is the use of telehealth and OCD treatment. Now, telehealth is not a brand new thing. It is definitely something that clinicians have been using, but I think just in general, people are more likely to have, before the pandemic, have sought out in-person treatment. However, now with COVID and a lot of places doing telehealth therapy, one of the great things that's come out of that is there's been a lot of people in rural areas that have not had providers that have been able to get treatment through telehealth. So obviously I do both. I do in-person and telehealth. And the great thing about telehealth is sometimes clients used to have to bring items in from their house. Now I can be in their room with them, their bathroom, like different places actually doing therapy. In my thesis, I researched, does telehealth have the same outcomes as in-person therapy? And the research showed that for OCD, yes. I mean, the outcomes are just as positive. We see just as much of a reduction in symptoms via telehealth. So what I would do is when you've gone to I always send clients to iocdf.org/find-help. So that's the find help tool on the IOCDF website. I always tell people now put in your zip code, but expand it. You used to only want to find someone 5 to 10 miles away. Now you can see somebody at the other corner of your state, or if there's somebody who's licensed in your state, even if they don't even live in your state, if they're licensed, they can see you. So that's what I've seen with support groups, with affiliate events, with therapy, that telehealth has opened up treatment to people that couldn't find it in their area previously.
100%.
All right, the next question is, I hear a lot at this conference talks about values. Any suggestions on how to get in touch with your values if you feel like you've lost them due to OCD?
Absolutely. So the first suggestion is join us in October for our live streams that will be all focused on values, and we'll go into a lot of detail, but it's really about our greater good and our purpose, right? I want you to think about what has OCD taken away from you. And instead of getting stuck on what it's taken away, let's turn that into our motivation, right? So that is why we want to fight. We want to fight to get those things back, right? So again, if I am struggling with feeling like OCD has taken away my relationships, my ability to finish college, my job, my greater good is that I want to fight OCD so that I can have healthy relationships and go back to school and have the career that I want. Take those things that's taken away and turn it into your motivation.
Absolutely. And the one thing I'll add is I have clients do this exercise where I have them close their eyes and think back to when they weren't really struggling with OCD. And I tell them, I want you to tell me how your best friend would describe you. And as they're starting to describe those things, I'm jotting down like crazy. And usually what we find at the end is the different things that people value of that person if the person's struggling to find that within them. So it might be like, oh, I'm an athlete, I'm a father, I'm a really close friend, I love to go camping on the weekends, all that stuff. And just like Liz said, I ask, okay, are these things that OCD taken away something you still like, you still hold dear? And if so, we start to get them involved in those things. Sometimes people don't think about that as treatment, but re-engaging in gymnastics, re-engaging with spending time with your friends is part of the treatment because you're living your life overvalues. You're bringing OCD and anxiety with you and just saying, I no longer care if it's present. I'm going to focus more on what I care about in my life than that. So
100%. And I know we have a lot of questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. I am taking note of all the ones that people are posting live that we may not get to, so that if we don't, we have that to go through on our next live stream. For the next question, Chris, I want to combine a couple. I'm going to combine 3 in 1. So the first question is, how can I get into a mindset where I'm okay with uncertainty? The second question, or second thing, is, what if I've done a lot of exposures, but the fear hasn't gone away? And the third is, when I ignore OCD, it keeps knocking at my mind until I solve it. How do I get relief? And I'm combining those because I think it's the same question, right? The question is really like, I'm doing exposures, but the fear is still there. And so I think we're both going to probably feel like that might be because you're probably not fully giving up rituals or fully leaning into uncertainty. But then also, how do I accept uncertainty and how do I get into that mind frame? If you can kind of answer those in one, if possible.
Absolutely. One thing I always talk to clients about is we make a list, probably one of the first days of therapy, of all the uncertainty that they already live with. So they went on an LA freeway to see me. We know that's uncertainty. We don't know if you were going to make it.
Very dangerous.
Yes. We're right by an airport. We have no clue if the plane is going to land. There has been planes that have had to land rurally, like in like home places and on the freeways. You're in California, so we have earthquakes. You eat at restaurants. I used to work at restaurants. I remember when people would serve old food, drop a steak on the floor and put it back up and wipe it off. So there's all these things people do with uncertainty already. So once people realize that this idea of living with uncertainty is already something they know how to do, then it feels a little bit more familiar versus something that they have to learn. So once they know that they already can live with uncertainty, I talk to them about the reason you're having a hard time though with this is because OCD is attached its ugly head onto it. And OCD is saying, I want 100% certainty. So if we can both agree right now that we will never have 100% certainty on anything. And one time somebody challenged me, oh yeah, well, taxes. Hey, 2 years in a row, they pushed back taxes. So there are certain things in life you thought were certain that aren't. So it's really about saying, okay, in my life, I will never grasp 100% certainty. I have to be okay and flexible with not always knowing the answer to everything. And I have to just focus on what I can control and let go of the things I can't. When people say the fear isn't going away, I often ask them about the mental component of ERP. I think people grasp the physical part. Okay, if this beautiful peace of mind cup, if this cup is, contaminated, they'll do good at maybe picking it up and taking a sip, but there's so much mental resistance. I don't want to do this. When is this over? What if I get sick? So we have to also really tap into that living with uncertainty model, that acceptance and tolerance of the uncertainty. So while I take this drink, mentally, I have to accept and tolerate the fact that this cup may be contaminated. And if I get sick, I'll have to handle it then. So although it seems scary to live with uncertainty, what you'll see towards the end of treatment as you're doing better is it's actually a huge relief. OCD makes you feel like you can control everything and you can't. So by letting go and actually living with uncertainty, you feel a little bit more at peace. And the last question was, the more I try to ignore it, the more it comes. Yeah, ignoring it doesn't work. And ignoring it is a lot of work. So what OCD doesn't want you to do is actually open the door and sit down and be like, talk to me. Tell me how I'm going to kill my kids today. Tell me I'm going to hit somebody with the car. It takes their power away. So remember, we're not trying to push and ignore OCD. We're actually bringing it in the room and just changing our relationship. So I know that was a lot, but I was trying to get all three.
No, it's 100% true, right? And the reality, I love, Chris, how you start that with sessions, is it's about, are we truly living a lifestyle where we are accepting uncertainty? If you haven't bought into the uncertainty model and the fact that that's what you have to accept, you shouldn't start ERP. I really want to push that on you guys, that doing ERP a little bit or doing ERP kinda is not going to be successful. You have to fully lean in when you do ERP, which means we don't try to suppress the thoughts. We don't try to still feel better. We're not holding on. We are willing and leaning into the full uncertainty. It's scary, right? And we do it slowly and systematically. But if we're not bought into that model, we're not going to be successful in our ERP treatment. So Chris, I know we have a lot of questions. I know we're running out of time. So I was thinking we should probably do a second live stream, and let's just go ahead and plan when we're going to do it and announce it now. I'm continuing to take notes if y'all hear me typing of all the questions on here, and Chris and I may still get to one or two, but Chris, when works for you? We're going to do this together live with everyone for us to, kind of pick up with the rest of the questions so that we get caught up and answer continued questions live.
Yeah. Are you thinking this week, next week, this weekend? What are you thinking?
I think this week would be awesome if we can, just so that we do, because next week you'll have Chris's Corner, I think, or I'll have a lunch and learn that's scheduled already for school.
Yeah, I think you have a lunch and learn. So I can do this week. I could do tomorrow at this time. I could do Friday at this time, or I could do Friday at 1 my time, which I think is 3 your time. Or I could do tomorrow evening 5 my time, or 4 my time.
Okay. I can do, so you guys are going to have to put in the comment box what works best for you, and you're going to be the people who vote. So I can do tomorrow at the same time, so 11 Central, but I could only go for half an hour, but 11 to 11:30, which might be sufficient time. Or Chris and I can do Friday at 11 a.m. Central, or Friday at 3 p.m. Central. So you guys tell us, and whichever one has the most votes, we're gonna pick that in a second. So Chris, I know you have the next question. Let's do one more each before we decide and announce our next live stream.
Perfect. So this one I'm going to combine too. Somebody asked, how long does it take to get better from OCD? And then the second question was, is there a cure? So how long does it take, and is there a cure?
So we've kind of addressed the cure question, so I won't go into that. It's about management, right? You can absolutely learn to manage your symptoms and live an amazing, successful, joyful life with OCD. We don't yet have a cure at this time, but we have amazing tools for management. As far as treatment length, it really depends on severity, and it depends a little bit on you, right? So the questions I would ask is, are you seeing an OCD specialist? That's going to be critical to be able to have good outcomes. And how motivated are you? So how much are you willing to lean in? How much are you willing to do the work? Because that is what's going to often be a barrier to the length of time we're in treatment, right? Are we diving right in at the beginning, or are we resisting and even along the way continuing to resist? So a lot of it is on our motivation, how much we lean in, how much we're willing to feel uncomfortable and feel anxious. On average for outpatient, for majority of people, it's about 12 to 16 sessions before they're going to see a big decrease in symptoms and progress. Most residential programs are on average about 4 to 8 weeks, sometimes more in that 6 to 8 weeks is the often average, but can be longer, can be shorter. So it really depends, and that's something that your therapist should work with you to kind of help give you their thoughts early on in treatment.
Yeah, and all I'll add is the one nice thing about OCD is we have some say in how quickly we get better. So if you're doing the work, you're incorporating the living with uncertainty, you're doing your ERP homework, and you're really showing up to session ready to work, you will get better than the same person with the same type of OCD who isn't putting in as much work.
Bingo. Last question from you, Chris.
Oh, okay. You want me to do another one?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, okay.
This
one says, I'm afraid if I stop accommodating my son, he'll get angry, break things, get loud. How do I deal with that?
You know, I think, again, this is where the emotion regulation piece comes in. You know, it is important that we don't walk on eggshells. It's important that we don't not engage in ERP because we're afraid of the anxiety that's going to cause someone, right? We can't tiptoe around anxiety. We can't try to avoid somebody ever experiencing or feeling anxiety. At the same time, it should not be unplanned exposures or surprises. So what I mean by that is that if you're a parent of a child with OCD, I don't want you to stop accommodating unless it's a part of the treatment plan and it's something that's been agreed upon and you both are doing this together. And so work together with the provider. Don't accommodate because you're afraid of the anxiety. Remember, that is not helping anybody. It's enabling OCD. But again, reduce accommodations based on a treatment plan that you've done together with a provider. So Jess, hopefully if you can continue to take notes of the new questions that were submitted that are the ones that I didn't write, Chris and I will absolutely cover those. So Chris, we've gotten a lot of feedback and everyone's all over the place. So it looks like Friday is overall the winner, and a couple are saying 3, a couple are saying noon. So you choose, Chris. Would you rather us do noon Eastern time on Friday, or would you rather do 1 o'clock your time?
Oh, geez, don't make me choose. Honestly, either work for me.
Okay, then I'll choose. We'll do noon, just so that we keep things decently consistent. So we will see everybody in 2 days at the same time. So Chris and I will be back for a live stream where we will answer the remaining of these questions that we have in advance, as well as all the questions that you're posting that we haven't already posted Friday at noon. So we will see you Friday the 13th. And maybe that's an exposure for a lot of people at noon Eastern time. And we'll be back to answer your questions. Thank you guys for the live participation. We're honored that we can add in another live stream to answer these and that the participation is so high. Good to see everybody.